Welcome to Brain Friends, where two neuro nerds talk all things aphasia, language recovery, culture, and community. I am Dr. Davetrina Seles Gadson, a clinical speech-language pathologist and neuroscientist.
And I am Angie Cawthorn, stroke survivor and aphasia advocate.
Welcome to our show.
Welcome to Brain Friends.
We want to thank all of our listeners for downloading the podcast. We appreciate everyone listening, so please tell a friend to tell a friend that we are here.
And we are.
Hey, Angie.
Well, hello, Dr. Celeste. Hello. What is going on? How are you?
I'm fair to middling.
Fair to middling. See, now you just gonna be the Southern gal today. You gonna give me? I reckon so. Listen.
Yes, I'm doing well though. How are you?
I am blessed and highly favored.
That's awesome. Well, let's get into our icebreaker.
Yes.
Today, the icebreaker is, tell me a time in your career that you had the most fun.
The most fun I had was a record company situation, and we put out an album. It went gold in like 96. They still played on the radio to this day. It was called Jackal the Bear, for real. And we took Chuck Brown's beat from Bustin'
Love
Loose.
Chuck Brown.
And he was so cool. We called him, right? Because we took the album, we made the album first. We didn't ask for permission to sample his music. And so we were like, if it goes well, we'll deal with that on the back end, because we'll rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Mm-hmm.
And we ain't had no money anyway. So when we finally caught up with him, or he caught up with us, he was like, look, I got to do my voice. look here, girl, look here. I tell you what, give me $1,000, we'll call it even. Look here, girl. We could not wait to pay Mr. Brown. So we gave him $1,000. He let us use the beat, or he didn't fight us on it. And when they play his song, they play our song, or vice versa. So it's pretty cool. So it helped him a lot too. So shout out to the Mr. Go-Go, Mr. DC himself, Mr. Chuck Brown hooked us up. But my best time in my career, the most fun I've had, was running those streets for the record company. They used to call me Roadrunner. And,
wow.
Yeah. And the reason I had to stop is because Roadrunner is not nobody's wife. So I wanted to be a wife more than I wanted to be known as Roadrunner in these streets.
Wow. I bet that was so fun.
Anyway, what about you? What is your most fun thing, the fun thing in your career? And you've had, this is going to be good. So
I would say the best time that I had in my career is when I worked as a travel speech-language pathologist.
Really?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It was so much fun. So I would pack up whatever fit in my car and just drive to a new location every 3 months. Unless the location was dope, I would stay for 6 months. And I lived in Dallas when they won the NBA championships. I lived in South Padre Island during the dead of winter, and that was like so fun on the beach. I lived in Chicago.
What?
I learned so much doing that. I made a lot of money too.
Oh, that's generally the best part.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I met so many different people. I was able to see how people practice therapy differently.
Yes.
And it was just one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever had in my career.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So they would pretty much, you were almost deployed. It sounds like a deployment almost.
Right. Yeah. So they would call and then they would say, can you go to this location? And oftentimes you were either covering for a maternity leave or just the facility didn't have, staffing. I remember even when I was getting my PhD, I connected back with my travel agency and traveled to like Rome, Georgia during the summertime to do therapy. It was just so much fun. And And I also remember it was so funny. I was living in Baltimore. So Baltimore was my home base. And I had taken a job in Texas, South Padre Island, Texas. And I didn't have lodging yet. And so it was a 30-hour drive from Baltimore to South Padre, Texas. And so my mom, said that she would drive with me down there. And we're probably about 2 hours or 3 hours from the location. And she's like, so tell me about the place that you're staying in. And I was like, oh, I figure we find it once I get there.
You're driving 30 with moms in the car.
Oh, she was like, oh my God. Like, of course now, that's why I just think it's so amazing how like the older you get, there are just some things that you're not going to do, but just being younger, I was just like, oh, I'll find a place once I get there.
It's fine.
And it was a beautiful place too. So
it worked out.
Oh, it worked out.
Of course it did. Of course it did. Yeah, I need to know where I'm staying. I want to do a B&B, but I feel like I'm always afraid. Like I feel like people know I'm a visitor and I don't feel as safe as I would at a hotel.
So sometimes I think Airbnbs are good. Like when I went to Mykonos, Greece. Ooh. We had a beautiful Airbnb. Oh my gosh, it was so gorgeous.
Yes.
But then sometimes I want to be catered to. So that's where I want to stay in a hotel.
Right. Because as beautiful it is at B&B, you got to bring breakfast yourself, right?
Well, we hired chefs. But
you did. Yeah. Okay. Come on, girl. You're like, well, I mean, if I'm being honest, we had a butler. And our B&B. How many? I want to hear about that trip, and I may or may not take this part out. I want to hear about this trip.
Oh my gosh, it was when I graduated with my PhD. I did an Athens to Athens, so it was Athens, Georgia to Athens, Greece, and so we did Athens, Greece, Mykonos, Santorini. It was just everything I knew I needed. It was so much fun.
Was it?
Yeah.
So I'm missing out on not going to Greece?
Oh, you definitely want to go to Greece.
Oh, I need to know.
Yeah.
If I'm missing out, I need to know.
Oh, yeah, you definitely want to go. It's so beautiful. And, whether you do it couples or friends, I would definitely go back. Greece is the only trip that I actually lost weight because they don't put a lot of preservatives in their food. So the food was so healthy. Like everybody on the trip lost weight in Greece because all of the food was so natural.
So healthy. Yeah, they let us they don't, our government doesn't protect our food in the way you would think. That's an episode. And, unless.
Oh, that's definitely, we could talk about how food influences the brain.
Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. It makes you, certain food makes you foggy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of go through this ritual of kind of figuring that out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're like, is it the food I'm eating? Is it just mild cognitive impairment? Or is it dementia? Like, you know what I mean? Or can I help some of these things with food?
Right.
Speaking of which, today we're going to be talking about the differences and the similarities of dementia, aphasia, and mild cognitive impairment.
Mm-hmm. When we think about mild cognitive impairment, it has to be severe enough changes in your cognition to where it affects your ability to do activities of daily living. So you have a significant decrease in the ability to concentrate or the ability to find words. You're noticing a significant decrease in your short-term memory, so much so that it's starting to affect your ability to navigate what you normally do. So your activities of daily living, challenges recalling detailed conversations or writing. But again, it has to be to the point where it's really, really noticeable.
So by the time it's really, really noticeable, it's I feel like at that point it's already too late though.
No, because some of the things that people also have to realize is that aging is going to create some of its challenges, just your normal aging. And so when we think about normal aging that begins in adults over 50, you know, oh no. Dun, 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 dun.
Wah, wah.
When we think about normal aging things, you're going to see a slight decline in your selective attention. So your ability to talk on the phone while driving, or your ability to, multitask, having some of those divided attention types of ability. So you're doing one thing and then going to do another. You might have some of those tip of the tongue experiences, but that's all considered normal aging because you're still able to go throughout your day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. So the stuff that you lose, stuff that happens naturally, is there a way to, let's just say, like for myself, I have the problems I have, mild cognitive, right? How would a doctor, if I know dementia runs in my family, I know the difference. If there is a difference, how would I know that, oh, this is just my new normal versus something that might be more on the hereditary side?
Well, there are tests. So there are different tests that one can do, whether it's a speech language pathologist or going to a neuropsychologist. And so a neuropsychologist can also do some of these tests, but some of the tests might be a Alzheimer's disease assessment scale, or one of the tests that speech language pathologists can give is the Arizona Battery for Communication Disorders of Dementia.
Oh, well, I was thinking you were going to throw the wob in there. And I know we talked about that on a previous episode, but would the WOB be something that they could take as an assessment for Alzheimer's as well?
No, because the Western Aphasia Battery, when you look at those tests, they have to be normalized within a certain group. And so the Western Aphasia Battery was normalized in individuals that have had stroke. And that's why that test is appropriate for people with aphasia, or people with stroke as a result of aphasia, is looking specifically at language, versus your dementia related tests are looking at individuals that may not have had any type of neurological episode, an acute episode, something that just happened, but they're experiencing some of these difficulties. Also, the dementia type tests are going to look at cognition in addition to naming.
Right. You might be able to name it, but your cognition is off. It's really jumbled.
Right. Right. Because when we think about language as a cognitive function, it's more than just your ability to name words or have your vocabulary. As a cognitive function, you're also thinking about, and I think you've talked about this sometime, the sound, like the perception. You're also looking at the prosody, so the how someone's intonation or expression goes into you understanding what's going on. So if I'm, happy,
Hey,
right. I can, when language really functions solely as a cognitive part, the person might not be able to pick up that the way I'm saying something is giving a more happy tone. They're like, well, why is she smiling?
Right. No, and that actually sounds legit within what I'm going through, what I went through with the stroke. But I think they call that emotional. What did it help me out? Throw me a bone.
Emotional liability.
Liability. I always want to
Like
say
when you're
libations.
emotionally labile.
I
Do
always want
that,
to say
emotionally
libations.
labile, not liability.
Not liability, and not libations.
Not
Because libation is a
libations.
drink.
Yeah, you're emotionally labile, right?
Okay, and I think I did because it was definitely my emotions were trash.
Right.
My emotions were trash.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even trash. It took me a while to kind of get them under wraps.
Mm-hmm.
But and that affects, if you have brain damage, the dementia, the Alzheimer's would affect you emotionally more so than a stroke would.
Sometimes it depends on where the stroke occurs, because if the stroke is in the frontal lobe, which can deal with behavior and emotion, then that could be why someone can be more emotional.
Right.
And the same thing with, when we think about a dementia or any other type of progressive disease, that's kind of just going, no territory is off limits.
Okay. So it can hit any part of the brain.
Right. Right.
Now, if it affects the back base of the brain, the cortex, then it's right. Did I say something wrong?
No, the like the occipital lobe.
Not the occipital lobe. Oh man, I don't have my like the very back of the brain that holds. Like if you had a major stroke there, you're probably not going to walk again. Like
the cerebellum.
Cerebellum. What did I
Okay.
say? I said something else. The cerebellum. If you would have it like dementia in the cerebellum, then is that a thing?
I haven't necessarily heard of that. Not to say, don't come for me. Don't come for me. Not to, not to
argue
say
with
that,
her in these comments. We need these comments. You let them argue with you.
All right, fine. Come for me if you must. I haven't necessarily heard of it going in that way. Most of the time it can be, well, I guess if it vascular, it can, maybe affect your gait, your ability to like walk and structure.
Wow. The brain is so fascinating to
Isn't
me.
it?
It really is. And the way it heals itself, how much is known, how much is still not known.
Right.
It's kind of what blows me away as I avail myself to research and just being in the room with much, much smarter people. And shout out to the NAA. I met your friend Peter.
Oh, Peter Turkletop.
He is an amazingly smart, nice, kind man.
We got to get you down to Georgetown. They're actually doing an Alexia study right now. So a reading study, which I think is top notch.
Is it?
Well, I'm a little biased, but yes. I think it's one of those areas that we're still trying to understand, like how people read, what systems are they depending on when they read. When I think about dementia or even like Alzheimer's disease, which is like a later stage, in those later stages, you do lose motor function. And so, that could be because it's is trickling down. But again, dementia is a cognitive impairment, where Alzheimer's disease is diagnosed after death because there's like a specific neuropathology that goes with Alzheimer's disease. So I know we're saying them a little interchangeable, but
I just learned that. So I'm going to ask you to say that again because I did not know that. So wait a minute, let me make sure I understand you, and then you can correct me from there. So if you have dementia, you can have dementia in the doctor's office, but I can't have Alzheimer's until postmortem.
Right. Well, so oftentimes, and again, this isn't this would be a better question for like a neurologist, but
Shout out to Dr.
oftentimes, yes, Dr. Turkletop, Dr. Roy Hamilton. So when we think about dementia, it's primarily associated with memory loss, but it's caused by a variety of diseases, not just Alzheimer's, because the main thing that is dementia, how aphasia is a loss of language and a loss of, words. Dementia is the memory loss piece, is its hallmark feature.
Right. And Alzheimer's is the end result of some of what a dementia could have been caused by.
Alzheimer's is a type of dementia.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
It's a subcategory of.
Exactly. Because dementia can be due to like Huntington's disease or, some of the other diseases, but Alzheimer's is a type of dementia that is usually fully able to say this is Alzheimer's after death, because then they have to see, if you have what they call plaques and tangles and all the things that are not something that I study.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I didn't know about it being that you needed an autopsy. You had to post-mortem cut to see in the brain for Alzheimer's. That I didn't know. Because it runs insanely heavy on my mother. I know she was showing signs, but she passed away before it got bad. Shout out to mom. Yeah, she was showing signs, but my aunt had it terribly bad, and my father experienced problems with it as well. But my aunt, it hit her really, really hard, and it was like I realized after she had kind of gone through part of it, there was a part of it that was actually aphasia. That when I had my stroke, I called my cousin, and I'm like, she has aphasia. Or she did. Now she might be far along now. She was too far along for me to come up with my, my grand diagnosis at that point. But I felt terrible that when I remember asking her, who's this, TT? And she would want to say the name, or you say, do you know who this is? She's like, yeah, I know who that is. Well, then who is it? And she couldn't say it. Well, then you don't know it. Because again, like I've said in numerous times, if you only know, you're not judged by what you know, you're judged by what you can prove And either this is who I said this is in the picture, or you don't. And if you don't, then you don't know. And see, she has Alzheimer's when it was actually the beginning stages. So it was really just aphasia, or presenting as what I know as to be aphasia now. But before, I didn't know there was a thing that you could look at a picture, know who the person was, and couldn't say the name. I experienced that in the very beginning of my stroke. And I remember going back to, I was still in my first therapy, and my niece asked me, Aunt Angie, who's this in the picture? And I went to go tell her who it was, and I couldn't say the person's name. And I knew who it was. And it was like, oh, well, we're not saying pancake no more. We need to work on the fact that I can't call my family's names in these pictures. That's more of a concern to me than saying pancake or saying whatever whatever stuff they had me saying that I felt to be not only remedial, not only insulting, but at that point, not helpful in what I really needed. What I needed to do was be able to call my family members in this picture on demand, because I could do it if it wasn't on demand.
Right. I think that that's why it's so important for individuals, whether they're treating aphasia. And I definitely know that this is something that they do, with dementia therapy, which is using objects that are familiar to the person. So objects, pictures, what have you. So then the individual is able to participate in some of these one-on-one conversations or just feel a part of the things because they know. I think the other thing that is different between when we think about dementia and some types of aphasia is that with aphasia, if it's not in your, with aphasia, if it's not in your temporal lobe, then or sometimes your frontal lobe, you can catch yourself if you say something that's wrong. Like, so you might say, Joe. No, it's not Joe. You recognize that versus sometimes with dementia, because of the widespreadness of the I don't know if that's the word widespreadness, but because it's so wide,
widespread.
Yeah, widespread. Widespreadness. Like you could call you Joe, and then it's like, oh well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right,
you Joe.
Right. You Joe. Today you are. You gonna be Joe today.
Right.
You knew what I was talking about.
So that's why a lot of times with dementia therapy, they talk about, and again, I'm not super well versed in this part, but they talk about being careful of bringing the person back to where they are. Meaning, let me clarify, meaning like if someone keeps referring to their parent that might be deceased, not to continually be like, she did, but to say, oh, well, she's not here right now, or, to help kind of come into their world, because in a couple of minutes, they might be out of that stage.
And one thing I can say is when you do that, if you tell them that the person has passed on, they'll be hurt and they'll relive all of that as if it just happened. And then they'll be sad in 5 minutes. They'll forget what you told them, but they won't forget that they're sad. And now you have somebody who's depressed. They don't know why they're so sad because they've forgotten the stimuli that made them depressed or hurt their feelings. But 5 minutes later, they still know that they're hurting.
Right.
So absolutely be careful with that. And I definitely noticed that, again, shout out to TT. I noticed that with her as well. And yeah, go into the cave with your person.
Right.
Don't try to get them, coaxing them out, because sometimes you have to go in and just sit with them where they are, not where you want them to be.
Exactly, where they are, not where you want them to be. I think that we need so much more research on dementia. And I have a really close girlfriend of mine whose mom has dementia, and how caring she is and how patient she is just something that I didn't, and what she's going through with her mother is something that I feel like I didn't really learn in school, to the point of I really can't tell her different things to do. Like, she really knows more than me as the caregiver. And I think that the research that needs to be done has to involve the patient, the caregiver advocate. It cannot just be, I'm the expert and let me do this dementia research, because the family is dealing with so many more. And I think that they could really help us better understand dementia.
Absolutely. And bringing people in to help tell their stories, and the more we can help those people that are coming down the road behind us.
Yeah.
Because it's not it is what it is where I stand. But if I can help somebody else, why not help?
Yeah. Well, Angie, this has been so great. I am just so excited to have this platform with you, and thank you.
Dr. Seles, you are the Dr. Liz, this has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for everything that you do, and you teach me so much. Every time on the mic, I learn something new that I can take out and share with my friends and my community here. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you, Angie. Bye.
Peace, y'all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Brain Friends. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite streaming platform. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Brain Friends, the podcast. I'm so extra.